Begin the current Daf Mesechtes Gitin Daf begin the second line down by the top of the Amud, where the Gemara continues a related discussion from the previous Daf, which we had mentioned this halacha of the otzitz regarding the halacha of ksiva then the sina. You're not supposed to have anything in between of ksiva then the ketzitza and then in the sina. So once we brought in this halacha of the otzitz nakuv, so the Gemara gets into a discussion in general regarding the halachic status of the otzitz nakuv in regards to different areas of halacha. Today's daf. In discussing today's daf are, like we said, halachas that pertain to an otzitz nakuv, which is a flower pot that has a hole on the bottom. Which, what happens if nikfu ba'aretz? If the hole, the perforation of the pot is actually in Eretz Yisrael, but the branches are actually sticking out over a chutz la'aretz, machlik is whether the zroim are chayiv b'meiser. Also, the Gemara continues to explain the halacha about our previous Mishnah that we had this machlikis regarding in kaisvin. You're not allowed to write loyal on the yar machik, not on erased paper, but diftera, which is also a type of a parchment that could be erased and it won't be recognizable because of the concern about forgery. What comes up importantly in the beginning of today's daf are different types of kinyonim. Metaltalin, the kinyan is meshicha, when you draw it, when you take it. Karka, the kinyan is bekesef, b'shtar, b'chazaka, with money, a document, or taking possession. Kinyan agav is the halacha that when one takes possession of a piece of real estate, of property, that then the other movable items that are on it are automatically acquired, even though you don't do that specific kinyan of the metaltalin. So in the previous daf, we had mentioned regarding a get written on something growing in an otzitz nakuv. We differentiated between the flower pot itself, which there everyone agrees is going to be kosher. We're not concerned you're going to break over a piece in the earthenware and give it to the woman. However, there was a machlekes regarding the leaf. If we're concerned that you're going to go and cut it off and give her that, which then it's going to be a chesaron of ksiva ketzitza and nesina. Now, related to that idea, the Gemara brings, as we said, other halachas pertaining to an otzitz nakuv. Says the Gemara, second line down at the top of the Amud of Chav Beis, otzitz shel echad. What happens if, and we have some cute illustrations today, otzitz shel echad, if you have the flower pot belongs to one person, v'zrayim shel achar. So these guys, they were two yeshiva bachim, they couldn't afford, they want to have a nice flower pot in their room as a nice decoration. And he says, look, I'll buy the flower pot and you buy the seeds and we'll make a shutfis. So the roommates had this and now this man is over. And who's gonna get it? So the Gemara tells us two different ways. What happens if the green guy sells it to the blue guy? The green guy is the owner of the flower pot. He sells it lebal zaram. There's Shimon, the guy with the blue. He likes blue. He likes green. He owned the zraim, the plant. So kiven shemashach, once this blue guy did the meshicha, so kana. So then he acquires the flower pot. However, if let's say Mocher Bal Zraim, the owner of the plant, sells Labal Otzitz to the owner of the pot, Loi kana, the Ruven, the green guy, is not going to acquire Achiyachzik Bezraim until he does a chazaka on the plant. So what's the understanding? So Rashi explains the fundamental principle of the kinyonim. The otzutz, the pot, is something that's detached. It's a movable item. The kinyan on it is with meshicha. So therefore, when the first guy who owns the pot wants to give it to the guy who owns the plant, he would have to do a meshicha, he would have to draw it to him. Now, on the other hand, the zroyim, the seeds, the plant, is mechubar. It has halacha like karka. You're moving the karka, but it has halacha like karka, which is acquired with kesef, shtar, or chazaka. So when the Gemara is telling us that it's only going to be ad sheyachzik, is for example if it does some weeding or it does some hoeing, which that would be a chazaka. That's the way you machzik in the karka. Which Rashi points out, it must be talking about that no one gave any money, because if he gave money, then he would acquire it with kesef, because you could acquire karka with kesef, shtar, or chazaka. But he didn't give any money. The bachrim don't have any money. They don't want to give money. So he cannot just take it from Shimon. He would have to actually go ahead and do a ma'aseh chazaka in the karka of the zrayim, which is mechubet to the karka, to be kind. Now, Tosa actually just points out that we didn't have to talk about Reuben and Shimon, like one owns the pot, one owns the plant. You could have said that one guy owns the pot and the plant, and you could have said if he's buying the pot or the plant. It's just that we're actually saying a bigger chiddush. Even though that the owner of the pot is the one buying the plant, he's not going to acquire, even though it's in his own pot. This is in his pot, and he's just buying the plant in the pot. No, you can't be acquiring it unless you do a meisach hazaka in the kalka that the plant is in. Continues the Gemara. Otzitz b'zroim shel echad. Let's say, okay, it actually is owned by one person. This green guy, he goes and he owns the pot and the plant. You never think about it that way. You're buying a flower pot, you don't think about it, but the Gemara is making it into a chalais of two different things. There's the pot, and then there's a plant. So he's selling it to someone else. Comes into Mark's flower store. He's selling him a plant. So says the Gemara like this: Hirzik bizrayim. When this buyer does a chazaka on the plant, kana atzis, he acquires the pot with his hoeing, weeding of the plant. This is where we learn the Mishnah Masechtas Kedushin. Mishnah tells us, it's confusing terminology, but it's used many times in Shas. Assets that don't have insurance. Basically, it's a term that means metaltalin. The reason why metaltalin is called properties that don't have insurance, there's no liability, there's no responsibility for it because it could get lost. You could steal it. It could be, you don't know what's going to happen with it. But it's referring to metaltalin. Now, in this context, we're referring to the otzitz, the pot. The flower pot itself is a movable item. They are niknin, they could be acquired in the chasim sheshla machrayas, together with properties that have insurance, which refers to real estate, because until the earth starts flying away, that's the one thing that will always be there. Unless they're saying actually New York City is going to be underwater in 2079, whatever, this and that. But like until that, the real estate that you bought in the city will always be there. So it's you always have that what relying on. So that could be bought with, in this context, it's referring to the zroyim, to the plant. The plant is karka. So that could be acquired with the karka b'kesev u'b'shtar b'chazak, with money, a document, or taking possession. So what's so interesting is, says the Gemara, when this guy starts weeding the plant, that's a kinyan of chazaka in the kalka. So that's going to acquire for him the metaltalin agav the chazaka of the kalka. So Taisa says he's not sure if you have to say agav akani, which in general that when you have a kinyan agav you have to say that, or maybe here it would be automatic. But the point is that that's a kinyan of agav. And that would happen by doing a chazaka on the kalka. Now, another case, says the Gemara, what happens if hichzik ba'atzit? He doesn't do mashicha to acquire the flower pot. He just does some work on the atzit. He decorates it, whatever it is. He does some type of like possessive act on the flower pot. So then says the Gemara, Af otzitz loikana. Then he's not acquiring even the flower pot itself. Because metaltalin, which is what the flower pot is, you're not acquiring with a ma'is chazaka. Until you do a chazaka, like we said in the previous case, on the plant. You do a chazaka on the plant, that's kalka. So then, b'kinyan agav, you'll acquire also the flower pot together with the plant. Okay, that finished these interesting cases. Now continues the Gemara in a related theme regarding this flower pot. Nikvoy. If let's say the whole of the flower pot was ba'aretz, was in Eretz Yisrael, v'noifay b'chutz la'aretz, and the branches are sticking out to chutz la'aretz. So as like Rashi says, meaning it was on the boundary of Eretz Yisrael, and the branches of this plant are leaning outside of the flower pot to out of Eretz Yisrael. What's the halacha? So on that says the Gemara following machlekes. Abaya Omar, he says, Basa Nikfoy Azlin. We go based on the whole, which is where it draws its nourishment from. So since it's drawing its nourishment from Eretz Yisrael, so it's Michayev in Maisa. Rav Amay says, Basa Noifoy Azlin. He says, no, we go based on the branches. The branches are on Chutz La'aretz, so the branches that have the fruit on it, Mipater from Maisim and Atayra because it's in Chutz La'aretz. That's the Machlekes Abaye and Rabbah. But the Gemara qualifies as Machlekes and says like this. Bida Ashrush, as this nice cute picture illustrates, when there are roots that are coming out of the hole into the ground of Eretz Yisrael, no one's going to disagree that we don't go based on the branches because it's literally connected to Eretz Yisrael. So of course then it's going to be chayiv in Maisa. Ki pligi, when did we say the machlekes is b'doloi ashkes, like this picture illustrates. It's in the flower pot. You don't have any roots coming out. That is the machlekes. Abaye says you go on the hole, which is that's where it nourishes from. So it's michayev and ma'aser. Rabbi says no, since the branches are chutz la'aretz, that's where the fruits are. It's going to be potter from ma'aser. Like you see, the fruits are in this. It's in chutz la'aretz.
If that's the case, what's the difference between what's in snooker and looking?
What do you mean?
So really, saying that depends if he has ashresh or not. It's a snooker chain and looking. It's like ain't looking anyway.
According to Rava, he's saying, yeah, according to Rava, it's not going to make a difference, even though it's nakuv, as long as it's not bet the ashresh, then yeah, that's what the Gemara is saying, that it would be the same. It wouldn't make a difference. Now, so the Gemara, however, has some questions on this teaching. Right. So Tais also brings certain cases. Depends on what the halachic arena is for what we're going to say. What because there's what area are you, and then there's also the halacha of where it's coming from. So that's again, it'll depend possibly on some of these halachas about we would consider something from. Like Tais talks about the svar also, there's unique over here, so it's not just the halacha of where we see something as. But that's where a lot of these halacha will depend on. But that's what our Gemara is going to discuss these questions also. So the Gemara says, really, with the ashrish lepligi, is that really so that when you tell me when there's the case you told me when it's rooted in the ground, you told me no one's going to say that we're going to go based on the branches. Is that really so? What's not? We're in the Mishnah Bab Mitzvah that says Shtei Ganos. There's two gardens. Zu Agav Zu. One on top of the other. What does that mean? So like Rashi explains, they're basically side by side. It's just that the property of one of them is higher than the other one. You have to allow time sometimes when they're developing, so they make it, they just push all the ground, and then you have the next row of townhouses on a higher plateau. So you have these two guys who share their gardens, and basically there's this vertical division between these two gardens. So it's Zuagavu, one on top of the other. They're side by side, but again, one's higher than the other. Now, what happens if you have a Yerek Bein Tayim? In that ground that goes up, there's a vegetable coming out of the wall in that height. So it's rooted in the ground of the upper guy's yard, but the branch is sticking out to the airspace of the guy in the bottom garden. So the question is, whose vegetable patch is that? The guy in the upper one is saying, "Mine's coming out of my ground." I said, "Mine, look, it's my yard." So it's machlekes. Remeir he says shel elyon belongs to the guy in the upper garden, and Rabbi Yehuda says shel tachten. It belongs to the guy from the bottom yard. So you see that Rabbi Yehuda says, even though it's ashrish, it's rooted in the ground, we're not going to go based on the ground that it's coming from. We're going to go based on the yard that the branches are in. So how could you tell me that the ashrish kulam lepligi? You see Rabbi Yehuda holds that even when it's rooted, you do go based on where the branches are. Says no, hasam keditani taima. There is like the reasoning is mentioned over there. That the Mishnah continues and it explains. Meir says, Ma am yirtze elyon liteles afarai. If the upper one wanted to take away his ground, his earth, in Kanyarek, wouldn't be any vegetables. Rameh says, it's mine. Because at this moment I take away my property, you have yourself no vegetables. Madam Yehuda says, no. Because Mamir Tzatachten, you can outdo me. I could say also, if I, the bottom one, want to do, I could be Lamalas as Ginase offer. He can fill up his garden full of earth. In Kanyarek, there's not going to be any vegetable here either. Because if I fill it up, it's all on the ground. Which is interesting because it could still be there on the ground. But that's the thing. Basically, you're not going to have anything over here because it's so. For Rashi says, since he has the ability to obliterate it, and he's causing the vegetable to be here, so he merits in it. But as Rashi explains, it's not because the halachic status of that's where the branch is sticking out into, and whoever has the branches has it. No, not true. When it's by the ashrish, everyone agrees we go based on the roots. There, the Yehuda holds that the guy in the bottom garden is going to get it, not because the branches are in his yard. Of course, the schus hakim of the whole thing being here is because I didn't fill up my ground with earth. If I would have done it, nothing would be here. So therefore, that's why he gets it, but not because of the halacha that we go with based on the branches. So now the Gemara asks on the second halacha: is that really so? Va'akati, but that the ashrish loy pligi. Oh, no, so this is also still on the Gemara says, is that really so that when it's rooted in the same halacha, that you tell me no one disagrees? Well, it says the Gemara the following brayso. But Tanya, learn the brayso says this: Elon miktasai ba'aretz or miktasai b'chutz la'aretz. If you have a tree that some of it is in Eretz Yisrael and some of it is in chutz la'aretz, like this picture illustrates. Tevel v'chulin moravin zebezet, says the first Tana, Divrei Rebbe, says that you have untithed and permitted unconsecrated produce that are mixed one in the other. Because Rashi says, you're not going to have any fruits of this tree that doesn't have some of its sap coming from Eretz Yisrael, which is Tevel, untithed, because in Eretz Yisrael B'chiv of Trumas HaMaisus, but some of it is also coming from Chutz La'aretz, which is permitted chulin. You don't have halacha of mitzvahs hatluyas ba'aretz of Trumas HaMaisus, because the nourishment is intermingling. So what's the nafkamina? Why don't you just say that it's chayiv because you have an intermingling? So Rashi explains, because you now take meiser from definite tevel on this tree's produce, because that could possibly be what's called from something that's mechuyev to something that's potter, because you can't call this totally chayiv. And at the same time, you can't take from here this tree to take trumas and meises on something that's definitively tevel, because this is not totally tevel either. It's like this quasi state. It's mixed. So it's this by status. So that's the Rebbe. Rebbe says, okay, it's going to be tevel and chulin mixed one with the other. He disagrees. He says no. Hagodel b'chiyev, that which grows in the area which is obligated, meaning the part of the tree that grows in Eretz Yisrael is going to be chayiv. It's going to be obligated. This side of the tree on the left side is going to be chayiv in Trumas HaMaisus. But hagodel b'poter poter. Side that grows in chutz la'aretz is going to be poter. Says the Gemara, my love, isn't it? That mixes neife ba'aretz and mixes neife b'chutz la'aretz. That means because half the branches are in Eretz Yisrael, half the branches are in chutz la'aretz, and even though all its roots, which is the way this picture is illustrating it, are all in Eretz Yisrael, or let's say if they would all be in chutz la'aretz, doesn't make a difference. We would say that the half of the branches in Eretz Yisrael chayav, half of the branches in chutz la'aretz are potter. So you see that you go basar noifai. According to Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, you see go based on the branches. I thought you told me, but the ashrish, if it's rooted, no one's going to disagree that you go based on the sharashim and not on the branches. So no, that's not the case. Mikta sharashim ba'aretz or mikta sharashim b'chutz la'aretz. We're talking about where, as this picture illustrates, part of the roots are in Eretz Yisrael and part of the roots are in chutz la'aretz. So says the Gemara, my tamish Gamliel. What's the Gemara's question? As Rashi explains, why is Rabbi Shloimy Gamliel, and this is why the Gemara originally assumed it was going on the branches, not on the roots, because what are you telling me that what grows in the area that's obligated is going to be obligated, but the nourishing of the roots brings up the sap into the whole fruit, into every fruit. So the roots of one side brings up saps to the fruit on the other side. So what are you telling me that which grows on the... If you were telling me like the Gemara's Havamina, which was trying to refute what we had originally said, to say that we're going to go on the branches, okay, that makes sense. The branches on this side versus the branches on the side, we'll go based on the branches. But if you're going based on the sharashim, based on where it's nourishing from, so what do you tell me? I understand Rebbe. Rebbe makes sense to me because Rebbe's saying, yeah, chul and tevel mu'rav, and they're all mixed together, one big mishkabab. But according to Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, I don't understand what that means. How can you tell me you go based on the roots, but the side that has the roots on the left side, that's going to be, those fruits are going to be chayv ma'aseh. Ones on the right side are going to be pater. What does that mean? You go based on where it nourishes from. You told me go based on sharashim. When sap comes into the tree, it doesn't say, I come from the left side. I'm going to the fruits on the left side. And the ones on the right side say, no, I'm going to the ones on the right side. It all gets, the tree brings it up and it goes to everything. So, and you have photosynthesis and it's making, it's everything all zusammen. So what are you saying? That it's going to depend which side it's on. So the Gemara says, yeah. Because the mafsig tzunma, we're talking about like this picture shows here on the bottom, there's this bedrock that differentiates in the middle, it separates in the middle of the roots, and it separates up until the trunk. So therefore, according to Rabbi Shimon, actually, it makes like separate trunks, and it's not going to nourish from one side to the other side. So he says, if that's the case, my time of the Rebbe. So why does Rebbe say that's Tavachul Muravan Zebazeh? It's not Muravan. It's the right side is Chutzlatz and left side is Eretz Yisrael. So the Gemara says, no, the Hader Arvi, that the tree from the trunk and above is intact. So it does get back intermingled again. So the Gemara says, what are they disagreeing about? So the Gemara says, Mar Savar, Rebbe holds Avira Mavalvo. Meaning, even though that whatever was from the roots in the ground is separated, but once it comes into the ear space, it gets intermingled, and then whatever the nourishment it had from the ground is going to be mixed together. And therefore, right and left, we're all going to have a tarivis of Eretz Yisrael and Chutzlatz. But in Ma'asav, Shem Lil held that no, that actually the ear space, meaning what's above, will not mix it together. And since inside the ground they're separated with a rock, which doesn't sprout, so therefore, that's why, yes, the right side will be chulin and the left side will be tevel. But one thing is, where all the sharashim are in Eretz Yisrael, no one's going to say you're going to go based on the branches. Here it's because of a different thing. It's because actually the roots are actually split. Therefore, he differentiates. But you're not going to say one way. If the roots are all in one area, you're not going to go based on the branches. Again, therefore, it doesn't refute the premise that we had said that the ashrish kulam pligi that you go based on the sharashim. The whole machlekes we had was regarding when you have a flower pot without sharashim. It just has a hole. It's not rooted in the ground. That was machlekes Abai and Rava. Do you go based on the hole or do you go based on the branches? We continue halacha of our Mishnah. We said in the Mishnah, machlekes between the Yehuda B'Seira and the Chachamim. Yehuda B'Seira he had said you're not allowed to write a get not on erased paper, which actually Toys over here explains, seemingly not like Rashi. He says that the writing is on. He says if both, it's talking about that the writing is on paper that's not erased, and the witnesses are on the erased area. It actually says if they're both on the erased, it says actually it can be kosher, because the Gemara in Bava Basra tells us it's not the same thing if you erase something once to erase it twice. It's just the problem is if the witnesses are on the erased part and the writing's not, that's the problem on Niyar Machik. If the witnesses only, because they're erased only once and the rest not erased at all. If you're going to erase now the top, it's going to look like the same erased once. That's the problem of Niyar Machik. But be that as it may, you're not allowed to write on diphthera because those are things that you could forge. Because maybe there's a stipulation and you're going to forge it, and therefore that's going to be a problem. Chum, on the other hand, said it's going to be kosher. So the Gemara clarifies this halacha and says, Amar B'chia Barasi Mishmei De'uli, says, Gimel Oiresein. There are three types of hides of parchment that have different names and different measurements, which were not fully finished. They're not full-fledged cloth. They are matzah, chayfa, v'diftera. What are these three things? So matzah is kamashmoi, which means to say, just like matzah, which you didn't ferment it like the laws of bread, it's just deloi maliach, you didn't salt it, deloi kamiach, you didn't process it with flour, The loy ofet didn't process with golna juice, meaning the tanners, the ones who make the parchment, they put the, how do you make the parchment? It's from the skin of an animal. It has to be processed with many different things. So there's many different stages in the processing, and if you do a certain amount, it's going to come out to be a different quality of paper. So matzah is the one literally like you didn't do anything. You didn't salt it, you didn't put flour in it, you didn't, Gitin Daf the moshav, you have to write on something. You see, I have nuchtam, you damn have to skin it, it's the shrab, right? So you don't do anything, that's matzah. Says Gemara, so what's the halacha? Meaning, basically, what are the different measurements that you tell me that you have regarding these hides that you're going to tell me that they're different qualities? For what halachas is it going to be? It says, Shabbos. Ramification is for the halacha of carrying on Shabbos, because for Shabbos, how do you qualify what's considered significance for the item that would be considered as a malacha beitzah, because it has to be a malacha chashuva, is something that it would normally, the minimum thing it would be utilized for. So v'kama shiur, what's the measurement of this matzah parchment? It's kediktani Rav Shmuel by Yehuda. It's not really parchment, it's whatever it is a piece of leather. So Rav Shmuel by Yehuda taught a brisa. It's kedei lotzer mishkal katana, to wrap a small weight, meaning the weights they had were made out of lead. And what happens is if you leave the weight out in the open, it could become deficient. So what they would do is they would wrap it in a piece of leather that it shouldn't become rubbed and deficient, because you need to make sure that the weight remains intact. Now, Bakama, how much is that small weight that you're wrapping it with this matzah piece of leather? Amabai says, Ki riva de pumpadisa. A quarter of the weight of pumpadisa, which was a very small weight that they had. That's this matzah type. Now, chefa, what's this? It's processed a little bit more. It's demaliach. Here it was salted, but they didn't put it with flour and they didn't put it with the golna juice. What halacha does that stage of the processing have? Shabbos, like we said, for carrying out on Shabbos. What's its measurement? That's kitnan, like we learned in the Mishnah Masechta Shabbos. Or, which again, this chefa is a little bit processed, and therefore it's a piece of skin that's fit kedilas kemeya, to wrap an amulet in it. So the size, the Taisa says it's not about chashibas, it just says about utility. But whatever the utility of that thing would be, what it's normally used for, that would be its measurement. So this is already type that would be utilized for a kameya. So that's however big that you have to make it for, that's the shiur of Haitzah on Shabbos. And diftera is a little bit more processed. It's it's salted, it's processed with flour, but it wasn't processed with golna juice. My health of what halacha is that? Like we said, like Shabbos for carrying out on Shabbos. It says its measurement as a get, to write on the get. Oh, now you know why we brought this in. Like Rashi says, that's like the Rabbanon of our Mishnah who say that diftera is kosher, because Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseir in our Mishnah says you're not allowed to write on diftera because somebody yachol is diet. According to the Chachamim, the measurement of diftera is going to be the size that you could write again on it. Now says Rashi, why didn't we mention full-fledged klaf, which has all those processes, including the last one of golna juice? Because he says that's not called because it's actually already klaf, and therefore he didn't count it with the other ones, which actually its shiur is a Mishnah Masechta Shabbos of Ayin Tesman Beis. Klaf is the amount that you could write the smallest parsha in the tefillin. That's because you write the tefillin, the 4 parashas on klaf, on parchment. But diftera is not kosher for tefillin, and therefore its shiur is the amount of writing a get. So that's why we didn't mention really 2 different reasons. One is because it's not it's klaf, and also because its shiur is actually explicit in the Mishnah versus diftera, a chefa, although its shiur is mentioned, but it's not explicitly mentioned, says Taisus. So again, that's a parenthetical halacha related to the halacha of our Mishnah that we mentioned. This diftera, according to the Chachamim, that would be the malacha beitzah on Shabbos, would be related to the amount of the size that you could write a get on, because that's the utility of this diftera. Okay, but now the Gemara continues, says, we had mentioned, like we said, the Chum say it's going to be kosher, this erased paper or this diftera. Says the Gemara, man Chachamim. In other words, who are they, and what's the reason why they would say it's going to be kosher? L'chayra, the reason would say it's correct. If it could be forged, this should not be correct, because it might be a false gerushin. The gerushin might have been totally in some type of conditions. It says, yes, I'm divorcing you, only condition I get this and that and that and this and this and this. A woman erases it. We're going to think it's a kosher get. It's really puzzle. Says Gemara, Amar Rebbe Lazar. Don't get confused. It's the Amoyer Rebbe Lazar, as you continue to base, that says Reb Elazar he. This is a different as the Tana Rebbe Lazar. That he says, Edim Mesiri Karti. He says what creates the severance of the divorce is the witnesses that were there when it was handed over. Therefore, he says that the signing on the get is not biblical. And it's not enough that you could give it without Edim Mesira, because they're the ones that create the creases, that create the actual severance of the divorce. Now, because Rashi explains, you most definitely need to have Edim. That we learn out, the Gemara later on, the Tzadi Amid Aleph, Erva, we learn that it says Davar by Erva, Erva's Davar, it says the word Davar, Apishnaim Edim Yakum Davar by Mammon. Just like by Mammon, the passage says clearly you need to have two witnesses, Erva also needs two witnesses. But, question is, which witnesses? Are we talking about Edim Mesira or Edim Chasima? Rebbe Lazar holds Edim Mesira, the witnesses that were there when the story was happening of the giving over, are what create the creases. If you hold Edim Mesira Karti, we're not concerned anymore that the document might be forged, because the Gemara told us on Daf Yomi Be'ez that when the Edim come and the Edim Mesira, they have to read it. If there would be a stipulation, they would know because they're reading the document. The husband's giving it over, or his shliach, in front of the witnesses. They say, Lamazain, the witnesses read it, and then they give it over. So, according to the one who holds, if Edim Mesira is the primary, when someone's coming to get married, she has to bring witnesses that it was given over in front of them. So they say, hey, she can't get remarried. The husband said, only first she has to funnel $250,000 into his bank account, and this and that, whatever, and she didn't do any of these things. So she's not going to be able to re-get married. But if you hold, like Remeir, that holds you don't need to have Edim Mesira, oh, you're right, that Edim Mesira makes sense, because you have to be concerned for forgery if you rely on Edim Chasima, because a woman that's going to come to get married, she doesn't bring the witnesses who sign on it in front of us. If there are other witnesses who recognize their signature, they could just verify that that's their signature. And if there was any conditions and she forged it, no one's going to know. No one's going to be the wiser on that. So therefore, says the Gemara, that, Yehuda Mesech would be like Remeir holds Edim Chasima Karti. And you don't have the Edim Mesir to confirm the original tonight. The Mechachama, like Rebbe Lazar, holds Edim Mesir Karti, and they're going to confirm the original tonight. But however, the Gemara has two machlokes in Rebbe Lazar's opinion. V'amar Rebbe Elazar, again, the Ameira. La Hirsha Rebbe Lazar does not validate Ela Alter. Only if she brings to court on the day that the get was given over to her, to let them know that she's divorced and to permit her to get remarried, only if it happened right away. That since it's immediate, and it's with the Edim Mesira, so we're not concerned for any forgery. But if let's say it's 10 days later, then loy. Then you can't bring the get on this diftara or this niyar machak, even though you have Edim Mesira. Why? We're concerned, Dilma have a beitana b'zayafter. We're concerned, maybe there were stipulations, and she forged it, and the witnesses already forgot. And therefore, even according to Rabbi Lazar, we would be concerned over them. We wouldn't allow this niyar machak and this diftara. Rabbi Yochanan, however, he disagrees. He says, no, even 10 days later, because them Isa, the Hava Beitana, if it was true that there was some stipulation, midka dechichi, they would remember, and therefore we're not concerned for any forgery. They'll know, they'll say, oh, what's going on over here? This is not true. We remember that this, she has to do all these different things that was not done. That's one machlekes. Another machlekes is Rabbi Lazar, again, Rabbi Lazar says, the Ameira, the Lohirsh Rabbi Lazar does not validate Ela Gitin. This whole halacha was only permitting on the niyar machak and the diftara for a get, because a get is only made to permit the woman to get remarried, and that's the primary point of it. And she could bring it to court right away, and they'll permit her to get remarried, and then she doesn't need to get anymore, because once it's already permitted in court, everyone knows, the word gets out, no one's going to remember that this woman's permitted to get remarried. But regarding other documents, what's the difference regarding other documents? Well, other documents, the point of it is, and Tais discussed this at length, but Rashi says that it's for collection purposes. And she might not take this document out, or he, whoever this person is that has shar shtaros, for a long period of time. 10 years later, the guy's going to come to collect his due. At that point in time, the Eid Masir are going to forget this already. And we're going to rely on the Eid Chasima. Now, he's going to forge the upper line, and the witnesses are signed where they already signed, and people are going to be none the wiser because this diftera, you can't tell when someone erases. Or Niyamachik was already erased anyway, you're not going to know that there was a new erase, or however, like the way Tais says. Then says Rabbi Lazar loy. Although Rabbi Lazar says halacha by all shtaris, and this Tais discussed at length also, but Rabbi Lazar, the Amoyer, is saying that this permissibility of the Chachamim was only said on Gitin, but not by shar shtaris. Because the Chassidus is a pasuk in Yirmiyah. Says, and this Machlik is how to explain what this entices, what exactly is the Chsiv, but it says in the Satam B'Klicheches, you're going to put your documents in earthenware vessels, that it should stay for many days. So you see that you need something that should last for a long time. When you have documents you could use years later to go ahead and get what you need. Which this pasuk in Yirmi is by shtorei mecher, by documents of sales, where you're going to need them for a long period of time. Now, if you have this 20 years later and you produce the deed and you forge stuff on the top, it's going to be really problematic. No Eid Masir are going to remember that. So therefore, it's only said by Gitin, not by shashtaros. Rabbi Yochanan says no, afil b'shtaros, even by other documents too. Ayah B'Ksibit says in the puzzle, "Manyam du yom rab neshesti" for a very long time, which sounds like as if that's inherent in the shtorei mecher, which therefore it should be problematic. Says the Gemara, no, hasam eitzav tevik mashalan. That's just a good idea that if you want them to last, then we could say that put into the earthenware vessel, but not that that's inherent in the shtaris, and therefore he says that we're not going to differentiate between git and the shtaris, and the heter was said to write on according to Rabbi Lazar on this difter on the yamachik, not just git but also shar shtaris. We'll start the next mishnah that says hakol ksher and lichtav as a get. Everyone's kosher to write a get. Afila cheresh shaita b'katan. So even a deaf mute, mentally deranged, and a minor, which the Gemara is going to explain how is that possible that they're kosher to write a get. Now, something we had referenced already on Daf Chafalaf, on the previous Daf, Aisha Kesebes is Gita. A woman could write her own get. What does that mean? How is she writing the get? Isn't the husband supposed to write the get and give it to her? No, she could write it and then be makneh to the Baal, and then the husband will go back and give it to her for a divorce. And so to the Ish Kesebes Shebare, the man could write his own receipt, meaning a receipt that he paid up her ksuba, because the woman was really supposed to write it and give it to him as proof. But again, since she's not going to get around to it, he could write up the receipt and then give it to her, and then she'll give it to him. And the reason why you're allowed to do this is she'in kima get ele b'chesamav. I mean, the question you would ask would be, how could the woman write the get and then give it to the husband to give it to her? You need to have that the husband's writing and giving it. That's what the Mishnah is explaining, because the validation of the document is only with the signatures. That's considered the making of the get. Although the woman had it written up, she gave it to him before that, and then it's signed by the husband, and then he gives it to her. Therefore, that's going to be a valid v'chasav. I've been asking, thank you to any time. Those things.
That's it.